Hey guys, as always, this is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be professional coaching advice or any professional advice. Sorry about the view in my crappy but cute room, but honestly, just wanted to get it done. It's probably apropos for this video. Bear with me on this one. This is super hard for me. I'm revisiting all the emotions of my rock bottom, but I really wanted to just get this done and get into my healing journey. So be patient with me. This is still emotional even after all these months. Side note on this one, I had to take notes just to keep myself on track, so you'll see me looking down. So to continue with this story, and I'll probably screw this up, but again, I'm not editing, so just bear with me. When I get back from Mongolia, I had full faith that everything was going to be fine with Hadi. You know, he was big on space, and I had the expectation that he would declare that I was his person and realize that we should have been together while I was gone to Mongolia. Just to serve as a reminder, I brought back the horsehead fiddle, and honestly, I just held on to it because I wanted him to come to me and tell me that he finally wanted to have that conversation that I had asked for in my apology email that I sent before leaving to Mongolia. You know, in retrospect, I know that was my ego talking, but at the time, I just wanted him to come to me to want to have the conversation. When I first got back, I was outside. He came up and said he had done a lot of thinking when I was gone. I have to tell you, I was super excited and thought, this is finally it. Then I visibly saw his wall go up, and he said something like, never mind, or you won't understand, or I don't remember what he said, to be honest. I have to go get my tattoo finished and rolled. Honestly, my hopes were dashed again. I saw him later that day with a guy with dreads who literally, when I saw him, sent shivers up my arms. He just looked pitch black to me. Of course, I didn't realize what that meant at the time. I asked Hadi about him later that day when I saw him, and he said it was a shaman he met. I literally had pure evil vibes from this guy, even though I hadn't talked to him. And I felt like that wasn't fair of me to put that judgment on someone who I'd never talked to. I didn't say anything, of course, because you can't pick your person's friends. But from my perspective, he always had terrible taste in friends. There was another guy he hung out with that I swore was in love with Hadi. That wasn't a vision, by the way. That was just pure reading body language. This guy was always meddling and lurking and trying to cause shit between me and Hadi by saying things that didn't even happen. He was the only guy that I didn't greet in the neighborhood. I just stayed away from him as much as possible. I just didn't like the way he handled himself and did tell Hadi about my mistrust of him just because I was trying to protect Hadi because he didn't seem to read the guy well, even though he had more intuitive skills than me. But Hadi was an adult, and who was I to pick his friends? So I warned him and left it alone. During this time, meditation was the only thing that quieted my mind. Now, I'll be honest with you, I had tried meditation before, and I was the girl that at the end of the class said, oh, the carpet's dirty. You know how they go around the room and say, hey, how did everybody feel about that? I was the girl that the whole time was thinking, oh, the carpet's dirty, or, oh, I can't believe the meditation, teacher makes X amount of dollars to sit here and have everybody be quiet. That was me. But during this time, literally, I was just trying to do anything that wouldn't make me think. And so I started listening to a meditation for 45 minutes that did a visualization. Honestly, the guy was super creepy. He had a super creepy voice. But literally, it was the only thing that gave me peace besides my work because my mind went 24/7. After several days, I finally realized that Hadi wasn't going to come to me. And I finally gave him the fiddle and a cashmere scarf as I knew he liked nice shit. I brought them both from Mongolia. And I did it with a note to try to express that he was the only one that I would bring a damn horsehead fiddle on my back across 5 countries. And honestly, I think he was fixing a bike when I walked up and swearing up a storm. And just intuitively, I was like, all right, I need to give it to him. He was super happy. I'm so glad I did it. It was like a kid on Christmas. It really warmed my heart. He was so touched. He came over to thank me and kiss me and express his gratitude. He was blown away, I think. Honestly, no matter what happened with him, I was so glad, and it all, made it worth it. At the same time, I think it was a couple days later, the time kind of runs together. Layla had moved out of town right before I got back from Mongolia, and it was a couple weeks early, so honestly, I noted it. She said she was coming into town, and wanted to have dinner. Honestly, I was like, game on. I brought her to the Indian restaurant, told her to meet me at the Indian restaurant where I had initially told my friend that what Layla was doing, and shared with her, that I knew her games. And so I was like, game on. Let's play with Layla. So literally, I was like, excellent. I was just batting her around like a cat does a mouse, toying with her. I kept avoiding questions about Hottie. I knew that something went down, and she was trying to kind of get information from me. And I also knew that she was threatening to tell me. So as soon as I walked in the restaurant, I sat down, and I had my game face on. I even told a friend of mine what I was doing. And I told her about losing 25 pounds. Even though I had always been self-conscious about my body, I didn't notice, just deadpan, just made me giggle. Now, here's the thing. Women, even if you don't notice that someone loses weight, you'll say something positive like, oh, that's fantastic. Hell, even strangers, you would notice say it to that. Even men would. And it just made me giggle inside. I did it on purpose. I knew she was backstabbing. I knew she was insecure and weak at the heart of it, and jealous for some unknown reason. And even though I knew hurt people, at the moment, I had no empathy for that. I was in my ego, and I was going to beat her at her own game, and I was going to use her hand against her to do it. I'm nothing if a master strategist. See, I grew up having to play chess in my own family dynamics for years, and that really honed my chess strategies. So I sat at dinner, and I waited for her to do her big reveal and tell me about Hottie and her together. But I also knew she was a coward, and snakes can't do it to your face. So I grew more impatient with her uncomfortable efforts to ask me about Hottie. And so I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to play with her some more. So I batted her around and asked her continual questions about who she was sleeping with and all sorts of other questions just to make her uncomfortable. Before a cat captures mouth and is batting it around, and before it eats it, I was super pissed. I was sick of being manipulated, sick of being lied to, sick of treated like I was dumb. So at the end of dinner, she never said anything. I just played with her the whole time. She suggested we go back to the restaurant that's right above the neighborhood that looks right over it. And I knew she was using me to put in Hottie's face that she was talking to me. And I let her, and I agreed. Funny enough, at the same time, Hottie sent me a text and asked me if I was around, wanted to talk to me or hang out. Knowing full and well she had threatened him, so I played with games with him too. I figured, what the hell, might as well kill two birds with one stone, and invited him to join us on the second floor balcony of the restaurant. Needless to say, he declined. Honestly, at the time, I was like, fantastic, bring it on. I'm so tired of this shit. I also, on purpose, I had told you in an earlier video about a friend who was like a brother to me. And he had been there with numerous conversations with me and Hottie late into the night at that gazebo. And so I, on purpose, invited him to join us with the sole purpose of driving the conversations at the table, telling stories about the inside jokes that me, Hottie, and this brother from another mother had. I literally manipulated story after story after story, and candidly was having a great time with it. Because each minute I did it, she was visibly getting more pissed and more pissed and more pissed, because it was just showcasing she knew nothing about the relationship. She knew nothing about all these times, and I did it on purpose. The more pissed she got, the happier I was. At some point, she got up and looked over the balcony, looking at Hottie's house, hoping that he would see us sitting there. And it just made me happier. I was having a cat and mouse game and, winning, and my ego was in full force. I was super happy about my strategic games. I was literally playing her hand against her, and she had no idea. She was so oblivious. I was so damn sick of them mistaking my kindness for weakness. And I was just having a great time playing her hand against her. She left early, made me super happy. I was happy about winning, and she didn't even know it. And then I left, and I went home, and I was exhausted. And then suddenly it hit me, and I was super ashamed of my behavior. I was being low vibes by playing games, manipulating, and winning at all costs. I really took a tough look at myself in the mirror about why, literally looked in the mirror. I realized I was allowing, in one moment of clarity, all this toxicity to change me. I had manipulated her, Hottie, and a friend I cared about. I just truly didn't like myself and who I was at that moment. I had stooped to her level to be right and to show them how stupid I wasn't. At that moment in time, I decided that winning wasn't worth me and my values and changing me. It just wasn't worth it. I wasn't that person. And so I tapped out of the game. Winning at all costs and sacrificing me and my values and who I was as a person just wasn't worth it. So I let her think she won, and I tapped out of the game. She did text me the next day to take another crack at me, and I just told her simply that I was busy. A couple days later, a week later, a couple days later, have no idea. Hottie texted me, which was super rare, and told me his friends, not super rare that he texted me, but we weren't really talking at this point. We were seeing each other, saying hi, but we weren't really engaging except the night that Layla was in town. He texted me and said his friends were in town. Was I out and bring friends along? And I just said, no, I was in for the night. And so he said, hey, we'll be home in 10 minutes, I think it was. Come meet them. I have to tell you, I was on cloud nine. I was shocked. Complete turnaround. So I went down there, met his friends, and honestly, one of the friends took me aside and said that Hottie had stopped drinking for me and they were sorry that they got him so drunk. And then I realized he was super drunk. It shocked me that the friend said that because I literally had no idea that he stopped drinking for me or why, or it just shocked me. And meeting the friends were amazing. And of course, Hottie was raving about the horsehead fiddle and how touched he was. And once he came off of his porch to see me, he literally attached himself to me. Literally everywhere I went, he had to touch me, hold my hand, put his arm around me. I was on cloud nine. This is what I wanted the entire time. In fact, we were walking as friends when they were leaving to the parking lot, and I had to step over a curb, and I didn't want to fall. And so I let go of him, and he literally glommed onto me. And I was just, this is everything I had ever wanted. I saw the love shining in his eyes. It's exactly what I've been asking for months. Now, he was drunk, but literally it was everything I had ever, asked for and wanted, and no hot and colds. He was all in. I could see it. He asked me to come into his house, so I did. And he was laying down, and he started having a conversation with me. And I told him he was drunk and let's have this conversation another time, but he wouldn't hear of it. What he shared with me that night just literally made my heart sing. I saw it in his eyes. He was literally deadpan, telling me how much he loved me and telling me other things that I had wanted to hear that are private between him and me, asking me to stay and then telling me that he couldn't be with me for a reason that, again, I'll keep to myself. I told you in the beginning of these videos that are some things that I'll just keep private, and I make no apologies for that. I have to tell you, literally seeing the love in his eyes and literally having him profess his love for me finally, it made it super hard to leave. It was one of the hardest times in my life that I just wanted to say yes and stay with him. But I knew if I did, that's it. I could never walk away. And then I'd put up for the rest of my life with the hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. It was an interesting feeling because my heart was singing and literally had a sword through it at the same time, because even in his drunken state, he said he couldn't be with me. So I left and felt like I was breaking his heart. Saw it in his eyes. When I got back to my house, literally as soon as I walked in the door, I looked at the phone and looked at the clock, and there was 111. Now I realize the angels were there to support me. At the time, for some reason, I didn't know that. I didn't know about numbers. I didn't know about symbology. But for some reason, it gave me peace as I was processing about, the whole he loved me, but then he couldn't be with me. And devastated that even in his drunken state, he said that. It was a lot, honestly. My emotions were all over the place. The next day, I got an apology text from Hottie saying he knew something bad had happened, but he didn't know what happened. And honestly, I was sick of this game. So I literally on text spelled out every single thing in detail about what he said, what I said, shared the entire night, and told him we needed to talk. It's funny. Every time we went through this, I was like, God, I'm an executive coach. I make my living communicating. And the one person that I can't seem to communicate with is Hottie. Anyway, I digress. It took him 2 days, I think, to come over and talk to me. They were both super long days. Because I was coming back from Mongolia and because I took the month off for the first time, I think, in a very long time, I just worked. And I was able to be my best executive coach self and do some AI contracting. I was slammed. I was super busy. And so honestly, I was just able to block that off, put on my professional hat, and think about work and just embed myself. But when I had downtime, it was a nightmare. I just thought and thought and thought and couldn't sleep and kept myself up. After a couple days, he finally came and asked me to come talk at his house because he was doing stuff. So I was like, excellent. We'll get this solved. He told me he loved me. We'll have this conversation. So I went. He started joking around when we got there and playing with me. We had a great banter, honestly. So I thought to myself, he's not great at communicating feelings, so he's working up to it. So I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. And I think I was there for 45 minutes, but honestly, it felt like forever to me. And the longer I sat there, the more hurt and pissed I got. Because honestly, I felt like this was a joke to him, that I was a joke to him. Or worst case or best case, he didn't care anything about my feelings. And so I left. When I got home, I just got more mad and more mad and more hurt and just felt like he just didn't care at all. Even though he loved me, he just didn't give a shit about how I felt. And so I shot him off a text in anger. And I basically told him I wasn't going to do this stupid joking around family, friendly banter, friend shit. If I was going to do anything, I would have just slept with him the other night and at least gotten something in my return for my efforts. It was a pretty shitty text, actually. I calmed down a little bit in the next couple of days, and honestly, I think I probably asked him to talk to me and apologize, but I can't remember. I'm sure it was me. Again, he's not the greatest communicator. So he was delayed for a couple tough days, and again, we went through the whole rigmarole of me trying to keep, my mind from going insane, and what was this going to mean, and dealing with my emotions from the other night, and then he showed up to my house. I have to tell you, when he walked onto my porch, he was super aggressive in body language, and I could tell he was super pissed. He barked something at me, and I don't even remember what it was when he came to my porch, and every single piece of me wanted to lay into him. It takes me a lot to get pissed, but when I get pissed, I come out swinging. Again, remnants of my childhood. I've worked on my temper over the years, but honestly, every single piece of me wanted to proverbially bite back. Candidly, I think the universe was looking out for me that day because, to be honest, all of a sudden, something told me to speak from the heart. And honestly, after all of this that I've shared with you and so much more, I don't know where it came from. So I spoke from my heart, completely and honestly, without anger, truthfully. And anybody who knows me, and you can probably tell from the videos, I always speak the truth, which may not be diplomatic, but I speak the truth. And I told him, I didn't know why this was so damn hard when we loved each other, that relationships didn't need to be this hard, and I didn't understand what he was doing. I knew he had a weird definition of relationships from the past because we had shared some of those, and then I shared other things that, again, will remain between us. He sat there and listened and looked pissed the entire time. And when I was finished, he basically said he didn't have anything to say and literally left. I have to tell you, I was devastated. And I realized, although I could literally, for the first time in my life, see his beautiful soul, see who he absolutely was at the core, I wasn't ever going to find this magic button for him to see it, or fix this, or say the right thing, or, somehow make him see who he was. And I realized that even though he loved me too, couldn't make him realize it, or fight for both of us. And nothing I said or did would change that. So I realized I needed to let it go, period, and just not communicate anymore. He needed to figure out him, and I needed to learn how to move on somehow. After a few days of being in the neighborhood and bouts of crying and working and crying and working, I was dealing with it. But I was super devastated, and it was super hard to even see him in the distance when we lived so close. But I was dealing with it. I was going up to have a quick meal on the balcony again, slammed at work, easy access, right in the neighborhood. And I happened to walk into the bartender who I knew that served food was telling me about this girl. And she was saying that the girl was literally saying Hottie was her boyfriend. He was coming up to pay her bill. She couldn't get a hold of him, and she was pissing everyone off. I have to tell you, I knew he was keeping secrets. I don't know if she was his girlfriend or not. I have no idea. But honestly, I sat down next to her. Again, I was playing my cat and mouse game, even though I decided not to do it with Layla anymore. And I knew she knew who I was, and that pissed me off even more. And I was hurt. I was so, so hurt. Here I was trying to move on, trying to deal with all the stuff that had gone on. And then there's this chick saying she's his girlfriend and trying to get a hold of him. The more she talked and the more I sat next to her, the more nervous she got. And she was pacing and trying to get a hold of him and pacing and trying to get a hold of him. The more she threw his name around and was pissing everyone off, the more protective and loyal that I got of him. Honestly, even though he had not been so nice to me and everything was still so raw, the last thing I wanted to do was communicate with him. But because I was so protective, I texted him and told him his girlfriend was up throwing his name around and saying he was going to pay her bill and using his name with everyone. He texted me back and told me to call the cops on her. And honestly, it took everything I had to even text him in the first place. My need to protect him outweighed my needs. And so I texted him back and said, I just wanted to let you know, clean up your own mess. He literally texted me back and said, thanks for the total lack of loyalty and don't ever contact me again. In that minute, I don't know why that was what did it, but my heart just shattered into a million pieces. I had done nothing but love him and be loyal to him. And he just literally devastated me. It was the last sword in my heart, and it made my entire heart go to pieces. I felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest between the girlfriend, between his reaction. I just was devastated. My legs were jello. I couldn't even walk down the stairs to go back to my house and curl up in the fetal position. So I walked off to the side and kind of looked over the neighborhood. I literally just couldn't. I couldn't think. I couldn't do anything. The manager of the bar, who knew some things probably, came over to me and asked me if I was okay. I couldn't even articulate to him because I knew if I talked, I would literally lose it and not stop crying. I never adequately thanked him for just being there for me and caring about me. A little while later in the restaurant, that same bartender's son came up to me, and I'll call him Tarzan. Honestly, I think the universe sent him to me. He has crazy intuitive gifts. We had played Making Dragons in the past, or, we had played games when I saw him in the restaurant. But he literally came up to me, sat next to me, put his hand on my leg, and was like, "Are you okay?" Now, I don't lie to kids, and I don't know how old he is. He's a little shit. And so I told him someone hurt my feelings. And he literally was like, people shouldn't hurt people's feelings, or they should say sorry. And honestly, he started to put balm on my heart. I don't know why. He just had crazy empathetic gifts. And then he launched into a story about bad guys. And it was literally telling me that there's bad guys and you need to stay away from them. And I asked him, again, crazy intuitive gifts to help me through this. But I asked him, do you think bad guys can change? And he's like, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe they can if they try really hard and want to. We had this whole conversation about bad guys. It would lasted for like 30 minutes, and it just made me smile. Even as devastated as I was, the universe was providing through little Tarzan help. I didn't know it at the time. And then we were looking over the balcony, and Hottie and the Dreads guys that I told you was pitch black before walked by downstairs. And Tarzan literally points out the Dreads guy and said, "He's a real bad guy. He's super evil. Stay away from him." Out of the month of babes, out of the mouths of babes. After that, he's like, let's have ice cream. Now, ice cream is my favorite thing in the world. I don't keep it in the house because I'll eat it all. And so I said, all right, just ask your dad. Go over and ask your dad if we can have ice cream, and then I'm down for ice cream. I was like, game on. Excellent. So he walked over to his dad and came back, and he said, my dad said you can't have ice cream. And I was like, do you mean you can't have ice cream? He's like, no. My dad said you can't have ice cream. So clearly his dad was messing with me to make me laugh. But he said, and this honestly just melted my heart. He said, I'm not going to have ice cream either because my dad's the boss and I don't want to eat ice cream when you can't because I want to share it with you. So I'm not going to have ice cream. Oh my God, it just repaired my heart just a little bit. I literally felt like I was on the battlefield with 100 swords in me and I was bleeding out. And I remember thinking, I can't believe that this is the one that took me out, that felled me. After every single thing that I battled throughout my lifetime, childhood abuse, childhood trauma, and I kept fighting, and I was a warrior, and I had strength, and I said, suck it up. And this one, I was down for the count. I'll talk about that stuff in later videos because I dealt with the remnants of all of that experience in my healing journey. But suffice it to say, I felt utterly and truly alone. I was betrayed by my family member and the man I loved. And candidly, Layla wasn't the only betrayal from Hadi, probably the mildest one in truth. But those stories are for me and me only now. Maybe someday I'll share them. And some are still unfolding. And then add friends to the mix and a variety of 2-bit players causing shit that aren't even worth my energy to talk about. Also add to the mix that I'd reached out to one of my dearest friends and she literally didn't even bother to text me back. Now, I don't ask for help ever. And it spent hours and hours and hours talking to her on the phone and she didn't even text me back. Another close friend, in talking about Hadi in the last couple weeks, said just get over it and treat it like a fling, and then sent me I hate men memes. And then the friend that lived closest had already spent hours and hours throughout the months hearing about the saga, and I didn't want to bug her. Honestly, I should have bugged her because she wouldn't have minded and because I needed someone. But me, being me, didn't call her. I know it sounds dramatic, but I literally felt like I was laying on the battlefield and bleeding out from 100 stabs from all directions. And little Tarzan had just wrapped me up in temporary bandages and were stemming the bleeding so I could get off the field. And I knew I wasn't going to last long, so I needed to just save myself and just run. I've never run from anything in my life. And I knew I had to leave, even though I had already paid a month's rent. I just couldn't be there. I couldn't be strong. I literally felt devastated, defeated, and completely alone. I didn't know who to trust. I'd been betrayed by people that I loved and that were closest to me. I know that sounds dramatic and my clients always make fun of my analogies, but it's exactly how I felt. I know many of you have been there with your own bottom or are there right now. And it's important to tell you as a side note that as devastating as that day was, looking back on it today from the other side of healing, I would do it all over again to be where I am and who I am today. But I didn't feel that way that day or for several months afterwards. And if you're there today, I promise you that there's hope. I'm living proof of it. And I'll take you through that entire journey, starting with the next video. But that day, I ran. I moved out the very next day. I texted the landlord, even though I had paid another month's rent, and said, rent the place, I don't care. And I decided to head out to the only place where I've ever felt like was home because I didn't know what else to do. I made plans that day to go to Costa Rica.